I'm Lana Medina, and this is for Communication 6020. I'm doing my outline on Chapter 13, Technological Processes. Okay, so first off, technology has quite honestly transformed the landscape of organizations and organizational communication over the last 100 years. And technology is still improving how employees, colleagues, business contexts, and management interact in daily work. It's changed so much. 100 years ago, people were communicating via letters. Now, it's via email, social media, and so many other methods. Instead of presentations that are on posters, we're now using PowerPoint. However, just because technology exists doesn't mean that all companies use that technology solely. For instance, in my current workplace, Huntsman Cancer Foundation, even though we have hard drive available for all of our copies, there are still hundreds of thousands of paper copies in storage boxes as an extra precaution because companies don't feel always completely secure about a cloud storage, about a hard drive. There's that need to have some other backup copy that's actually physical. Moving on. There are so many types of organizational communication technology that are available today. Electronic mail is one of the most popular. According to Email Statistics Report, in 2012, there were 145 billion email messages sent, the majority for business and consumer emails. However, when I did a quick Google search, according to the Radicati Group Incorporated, which is a technology market research firm, a total worldwide emails reached 281.1 billion in 2018 and is expected to grow by more than 4.5 billion by the end of 2022. And beyond that, it's kind of hard to imagine, to be perfectly honest. I have noticed from professional experience that communication companies I have noticed that there's a shift nowadays of moving slightly away from email because people get too bogged down and they get to the point they're not even opening their emails. And so there's other types of communication software that's available to try to reduce the number of just quick messages sent to people, especially among just quick colleagues or coworkers among just a project. One I've used in the past is called Slack. It's easy to send quick messages, files, communicate. I've also seen other teamwork applications where people can work on projects and reduce that email flow, reduce even the number of files that they're sending to people. They just upload it, correct it via there, upload the new version, and post messages alerting colleagues that that's available now. Okay. So moving on, the World Wide Web. It offers unlimited possibilities for organizations today, including the ability to access information for a company or a competitor, research information, access news information, and use social media to promote a business. I've seen this personally. I've helped manage the social media accounts for KUTV. I've helped manage my own social media accounts as a reporter for the Deseret News. I've helped manage several brand social media accounts working at Channel Up. And I've seen the different types of social media needs for the Huntsman Cancer Institute and the Huntsman Cancer Foundation, a nonprofit. There is unlimited possibilities for using social media to spread the information. However, while the World Wide Web is so wonderful, there also has a negative impact on workplace productivity. That same social media has a very great tendency to distract employees. Seen personally the number of employees checking Facebook, Twitter, looking online at news articles, checking email, ordering products on Amazon. It does reduce workplace productivity as a possibility of concern. Okay. However, we consider why are electronic mail, World Wide Web, and other ICT, information and communication technology channels useful to organizations. It offers so much. There's faster message transmission, communication potential despite wide-ranging geographical differences, asynchronous communication. People can communicate at different periods of time. These systems allow for collaboration across time and space, which can create a more globally diverse workplace. I've personally worked for a company that employed half of its workforce from Thailand, and colleagues in Thailand, adjusting for time change, of course, worked with the employees working here in Utah hand in hand using that Slack communication software I mentioned earlier. These organizational communication technologies make it possible to do that. There's other aspects of new organizational communication media, or anonymous messages through online chat forums, memory storage and retrieval features have changed. New technology can also take away communication tools. For example, while phone conference calls are very wonderful and much easier sometimes than in-person conference meetings, just because of the possibility and wide-ranging and less travel need for some employees, you lose that face-to-face communication, and you also lose nonverbal cues sometimes, which can be very, very helpful. They also do have Skype and video conferencing now available, but you still kind of lose that interaction as much. There's a couple questions going forward. First off, what are some of the factors that will lead organizational members to choose particular types of technologies for their communication needs? And once the technologies are used, do they have an impact on organizational communication processes? I believe so, and we'll get to that. So first off, when you consider technology adoption and use, even though that technology may be available, does not mean people immediately want to access it. As I mentioned earlier, even though that cloud storage and data is available for companies, actually getting into the process of using it can take some time. My company, the company I work for, Huntsman Cancer Foundation, is currently testing out a teamwork application software, but it's only being used by a limited number of employees. They're testing it with more lower level employees before, and getting it more, I'd say, mastered before they start bringing it to more management level other employees, or sometimes older employees as well, ones who are a little more resistant to change. Not necessarily an age factor, however, but in this case, those ones are more resistant to change. Marcus in our text argues that there needs to be a critical mass of people using the technology for it is to be embraced as a permanent fixture. In my professional experience, I've seen this to be very true. We're testing on the lower level, getting more people more adjusted to it, before then it becomes more widespread. Obviously, that's just a very small sample, and it's my own personal experience, but nonetheless, I feel that I agree. Let's see. Let's also now consider the media richness model, which was proposed by Richard Daft and Robert Langle in 1984 and 1986. The model was proposed after researching how managers choose one type of communication over another based on an organizational task. Organizational communication tasks change based on ambiguity as a result of conflict or different interpretations of an issue. The more difficult a task, or one that has a greater possibility of conflict, is going to be more ambiguous. There's key factors that can impact how organizational managers convey information. There's multiple cues, the availability of feedback, personal focus of the medium. Communication media also manages on a continuum range. There's a range from rich, which would be face-to-face communication, to lean, which is more like if you're just sending like a flyer in the mail, for instance. Theorists tend to argue that to measure task ambiguity against media richness, and believe that managers tend to choose media that equal the message ambiguity. For instance, with highly ambiguous tasks, managers will choose a rich communication medium. With low ambiguous tasks, managers will choose a lean communication medium. Okay, there's also another theory to consider, the channel expansion theory, which was proposed by Carlson and Zmad in 1999. They argue that personal experience will impact the richest perspective. Another theory to consider, the dual capacity model. DeRosso and Raines in 2008 argued that managers will choose a communication medium based on other factors, including their own need for a personal touch in the situation or organizational culture differences. I personally agree with that model. I believe that organizational culture can greatly impact how a manager is going to handle a situation or handle the communication required in it. Okay, now, social factors. I want to go into the social information processing model, which Janet Folk and colleagues proposed in 1990. They argued that communication among coworkers, managers, and customers can impact media usage. For example, colleagues with a negative or positive things to say about a certain type of technology can persuade or dissuade someone to try to use that communication technology. For instance, if a colleague does not trust, for instance, that teamwork application that I was referring to, and talks negatively about it, saying that it's not a good model, that it impacts productivity, that it is harder to use and will harm the company in the long run, then that could impact how managers view it, especially if there's more employees voicing this, if this is a very strong opinion employee, if this is a very well-trusted employee, it can all impact those things. The model can be, Folk and colleagues argue that the model is impacted by objective characteristics of the communication technology, past experience and knowledge, if they've used it before and don't trust it, for instance, and individual differences and social information. Research indicates that leaders on nonprofit organizations will look outside their company instead of to colleagues or employees to decide whether to use certain types of technology. I've seen this to be true and inaccurate, but again, I've only come from one nonprofit organization, but that was my own. In summary, the decision to use organizational communication media is a combination of several factors, including the richness of the medium, ambiguity of the task, symbolic value of the medium, whether you're working with others, and social information instruction. Okay. Now, when considering the effects of information and communication technology, there are several effects of it. But it's important to note that just because there is new technology for communication, it doesn't mean that it will be used the way it is intended. How new technology is used will depend on its features and the people or the organizations using it. Also, new communication technology doesn't mean that that new technology replaces outdated forms of communication. Sometimes it just adds to the workload. We mentioned video conferencing. Video conferencing doesn't mean face-to-face meetings can be removed entirely, but it can add to it. And a disturbing result of this also, there's been an overload of data. I mentioned Slack earlier and how a lot of companies are trying to switch to reducing the amount of email. But this also refers to email, text, phone calls, social media, and others. It feels like sometimes we are quite literally drowning in data because there's just so much out there. You can receive a text about something you just had a phone call about. You can receive a message through Slack or others, or even social media, with a follow-up email, all revolving around the same exact thing. And speaking of social media, as I mentioned earlier, can be very instrumental and potentially damaging to an organization. Miller argues that social media can be useful by helping employees work together and have an effect on larger work groups. However, I disagree. I believe there's other technology for communication that organizations are more likely to trust. I mentioned Slack. An organization will have no control over Facebook, and some people choose not to have social media accounts. It's too varied. I've worked with someone who has one Facebook account, type of social media for work, just for coworkers, one just for family, and one just for friends, just because there's a concern about that overlap. Miller also argues that social media is useful for developing a social media image for an organization. I completely agree with this. Brands that want to sell to the public, organizations that want a public image, public officials will develop their own Facebook and Twitter accounts, often one for private, one for public. Public agencies will also develop their own Facebook account, often to disseminate information to the public. Another element of Facebook is the ability to create and share events, notify the public of emergencies, sales, major events, and more. Jonathan Alter points to Facebook in helping former President Barack Obama's campaign reach out via social media. Social media is also believed to have an impact on larger movements, such as the global social justice movement in New Zealand. However, It's important to note some of the negatives. Social media is suspected of contributing to the 2016 presidential election and impacting how social media users received news information. Not to mention the suspected Russian involvement using social media to disseminate negative information about Hillary Clinton in 2016. Now moving on, virtual organizing and telework. Distributed work, which Grantham proposed in 1995. There are several different types of distributed work. Central office, where work is accomplished by people in the same time in the same place. Telework, when work is done at the same time but in a different place. Flex time, when work is done at the same place but at a different time. This would be, another example for this would be someone who maybe works a different schedule or changes their hours. Virtual organizations, when work is accomplished at different times and different places. When I mentioned my company used to work for Channel Up, who employs employees in Philippines, or sorry, yes, in the Philippines. I think I accidentally said Thailand earlier and I meant Philippines. This is an example of that, where these employees are working at a different time and a different place, but still accomplishing work through that organizational communication technology. In 2011, more than 3 million Americans worked from home multiple days per week. I have 2 colleagues currently at the Huntsman Cancer Foundation who work from home at least 1 day a week. One chooses to do this because of a lengthy commute. The other works from home 3 days a week because she has children. There are multiple economic benefits of telework. Analysts estimate a business can save $11,000 per person per year. There's also economic benefits of telecommuters, $2,000 to $7,000 per year, and environmental benefits from reduction in greenhouse gases, especially if you have a lengthy commute. However, there can be some downside to this, or some challenges. Meyer suggested that there's problems with leadership, decision-making, building trust, and communication. I've seen this lack of trust first place. Communication is entirely online. It's more difficult to get to know someone. You can't read facial features or gestures, and you lose that form of communication. There's also other concerns with virtual work, including loss of productivity and less control over workers from a distance. Some companies are trying to emphasize the need for a separation between work from home. Perlson and Saunders outlined 3 paradoxes regarding the advantages and disadvantages of telework and virtual organizing. First paradox, increased flexibility and increased structure. Second one, greater individuality and more teamwork. The third one, more responsibility and less control. Telework means tasks are accomplished independently. However, managers would be more likely to review an employee's work more critically because of that distance. In summary, there's also a good way of looking at this. How would different theoretical approaches consider new technology or the information communication technology? There's classical, human relations, human resources, systems, cultural, constitutive, critical, and feminist. All of these can consider different ways of using that new technology in an organization. And I would explain all of them, but I have already gone over the 15 minutes. So I would just like to quickly end by saying thank you for your time, and I hope you enjoyed my presentation. Goodbye.